At the meantime, and just want to address in Arabic our colleagues from the AUC. I was about to say AUB. يعني سعيد طبعا بوجودي في احدى اهم منارات العلم والفكر في الوطن العربي. تحياتي للاصدقاء والمسؤولين على الجامعه الامريكيه في القاهره. I don't see Ibrima. Ibrima in his opening remarks, Ibrima Sal, our executive director from Trust Africa, in his opening remarks this morning was mentioning, in fact, a lot of Africans who really spent a huge part of their career in this university. And he mentioned some of them, particularly, in fact, from South Africa. From South Africa, where, in fact, within the apartheid time, a lot of scholars from South Africa came here and almost spent all their career here. And really, I don't know if Ibrima is in the room, but I have Ibrima mentioned some of them, and probably I would like to mention Professor Archie Mafiji, who was teaching, is from South Africa, and who was teaching here, in fact, and married to one of our colleagues also from the university. And so the late Archie Mafiji, who was teaching here for many years and almost spent all his career in this prestigious and great university. So happy and proud to be in the American University in Cairo. So thank you very much. I really appreciate, and this is my presentation. I'm not going, I mean, it's available. My colleagues from Trust Africa told me that they will circulate the presentation. So I will just make sure that within the 10 minutes, talk to some of the slides in the presentation. The presentation is about, of course, the failure. I think since this morning, it's the same theme, the failure of a classical model of ODA-supported, development in the continent. And of course, I think we have a very comprehensive, very fantastic conversation this morning. So I'm going to build on that conversation, taking into account, in fact, the debate within the international institutions, multilateral development banks, in the UN institutions. This is the 5 issues I was going to mention in my presentation. I will just really pick some few 4 or 5 slides and talk to some few slides. So the first is really the introduction. An introduction, I'm going probably to take some time on the introduction. Then the second chapter is the failure of the classic financial for development model, difficulties, Africa's crisis and the need for a new financing for development framework, and then towards a new financial for development framework to build Africa's autonomy and resilience. I think the main idea, I think it was expressed by many colleagues this morning, and I think highlighted by Mr. Jani also in the discussion of the second panel in the morning. But the main idea, I think it's at the end of this experience of building our development in the continent on the basis of an external ODA model for financing for development. I think there is a need now to shift and to move for really an internal model or an alternative model of financing for development for the continent. I think some of the items of this new model were highlighted in this morning. So I'm just going to give you some The first issue in the introduction is really the financing for development today is at the center of some global conversations and debates on development for different reasons. The first one is, of course, the holding of the fourth conference for development in Sevilla a few days ago. Secondly, and more importantly, I think it's really the global environment marked by huge uncertainty and ongoing concerns about the world economy and the position of the African countries and developing countries in general in the world. Increasing fragmentation of the world economy, trade wars since January 2025, de-risking and friend-shoring strategies where, in fact, are really the guiding principle of international economics and the world economics. Weakening of the multilateral institution. You heard what's happening in some UN institutions like WHO, like the marginalization of the WTO, the decision of the American administration, in fact, to reduce the ADF, which is really the easiest window of the African Development Bank. So a lot of development, but also the rise in the geopolitical conflicts, war in Ukraine and its implication on the energy and also cereals, the war in Gaza. Marwa, my colleague Marwa spoke about it, and other conflicts. And in the continent, probably the most devastating conflict is what is happening in Sudan. So in this context, African economies are really becoming more vulnerable, and the external and global shocks reinforce the internal fragility of the different African economies. The question is whether the development financing model that has prevailed, in fact, over the last 3 decades is still appropriate for supporting African development. And that's the main question. That's the issue we were debating since this morning, and that is the most important issue in this conference. My position and my thinking is also in agreement with what was almost the consensus emerging from this morning conversation, is that Africa needs a new development financing model to foster the structural transformation of the economies and put it on the road to collective autonomy and shared sovereignty. So this is really the main idea I tried to develop. So from the second point, I'm going to take 1 or 2 comments, or 1 or 2 slides. First, I think the issue of financing for development has been really a major subject for the ones teaching economies. It's really an item in development economics, but with considerable controversies about the way to do and the way to think the financing for development. There is a radical point of view which has considered that the external financing model is a mean for perpetuating the dependence of the countries of the South on the global economy. The late Samir Amin, the son of this country, was probably one of the most, supportive of this idea, and the whole school thinking in the economics are really supporting this idea. But there is another, I think, dominant point of view, which has become really the mainstream thinking and position, is that the countries of the South have a financing gap between their savings and the investment needs. And in order to close that gap, there is a need really for an international support and international financing. So this is the idea to close the gap. This is the idea behind all the 4 decades of policies, choices to use external and ODA and external financing for development, really to support the African countries and to support all the development countries. This analysis, as I said, will be really the basis of the mainstream thinking about financing for development in the last at least 4 decades. Several forms of this financing, the ODA, FDIs, the role of the MDBs, multilateral development banks, etc. So this main idea, in fact, was behind the organization of 4 main summits on ADA organized by the UN system. The first one is in Monterrey, 2002. The second one is 2008 in Doha. And the Addis Ababa, I think the one in Addis Ababa in 2015. And the last one is in Sevilla in 2025. The most important thing, I think, when analyzing the results and of these major summits and major commitment and consensus, in fact, they were not able to reduce, they were not able to increase the level of support to African countries. And the ODA, as it was explained this morning, in fact, was really reducing and was not able to give the support or the needed support for African countries. So this was really the general assessment of the failure, or behind the general assessment of the failure of the traditional ODA-based development financing model. This model has not helped, in fact, to bring about the structural transformation African countries needs and the countries from the South. It has also not helped to speed up the achievement of the SDGs. In the third chapter, I'm not going to mention it, but in the third chapter, I was giving some results about Africa's achievement, in fact, to reach the SDGs. And Africa, all African countries, since, in fact, the COVID-19 experienced huge delays in the different objective of the 17 SDGs objectives. The system has also given a series of phenomena that have strengthened the dependence of the countries of the South, including the net transfer of resources from the country of the South, the different or recurrent debt crisis, the illegal, Mr. Jani was talking about it this morning, also the illegal transfer of resources, financial vulnerability and dependence of African countries. In general, in fact, there is a consensus also in the economic debate today that the model strengthened financial dependence and geopolitical influence from donors. Through the ODA, through the external financing, the priorities in the interest of the donors are the ones, in fact, implemented in the continent. Investment flows remain limited. And also, I think the end of it was mentioned this morning that today the ODM model is undergoing major changes as a result of the fragmentation. The priorities today are really the geopolitical tension and geoeconomic tension, and the priorities given to security and defense, which is reflecting really the situation today. Crisis also, as I mentioned, from the multilateral institutions that supported the ODA system, such as the United Nations institution and the MDBs. The UNDP was one of the major actors, in fact, in supporting the African countries, the Africa Office, the African Development Bank too. So there is a major, I think, crisis of the failure, actually, more than a crisis. And there is a need, in fact, to really abandon this outdated model of ODA paradigm and really define and implement a new financing for development framework, which places the transformation of African economies and the construction of regional autonomy at the heart of the priority. I'm going to go very quickly on some of the ideas. Some of them, I think they were mentioned this morning. It's very difficult to make your presentation at the end of a very really fantastic and exciting sessions this morning. So there is a need to renew the thinking on Africa's development, as it was mentioned this morning. Before thinking about a new financing model, I think there is a need also to renew the thinking of the development of the continent. It is important to move away from a conventional paradigm framework which have only served to reinforce the continent dependence. New development strategy must be defined in order to put the continent in the path of development. And here I would like to insist on one of the most important things. I think it was not mentioned today, and in the continent as Africans, I think we need really to put it as because in the continent, I think we have a strategy, and the AUC, the African Union Vision 2063 really offer for all of us the vision to build our development and insisted on two, I think, major issues. First is the structural transformation of African economies, one of the priorities of the continent, and of course, the regional integration, the regional cooperation is the second most important issues and highlighted by the Vision 2063. The vision also involves strengthening international cooperation based on the interest of African countries. So we are not close to international cooperation. International cooperation should be a part of our strategy of transforming the continent, but international cooperation should be really based on Africa's interest. The new model, financing model, I think we must really make a major shift from the old model based on ODA and external financing. The finance must serve the continent strategic projected and build its autonomy and sovereignty. Some of the issues raised, probably I'm going to insist on the ones who were not raised this morning. And the most important thing is really the fiscal revenues. I think we discussed, and I think it was the different panels this morning informed us about the how to call the external transfer of resources, the tax evasion from the continent. But one issue I wanted really to highlight, for me, it's the first priority concerning the effectiveness of African tax system in mobilizing resources. The share of tax revenues in GDP of the continent is 16%, only 16%, and it's 18% in Asia, and the global average is 28% and 34% in the OECD countries. So, and that is really when we are talking, like what it was raised this morning about the credibility and sustainability of financing for development and internal financing for development, really the improving the effectiveness and improving the capacity of the internal fiscal system in the continent is quite strong. We did, when we were in ECA, some estimate of increasing, in fact, the level of tax revenues in Africa, and we think that increasing by 4% the tax in GDP of the continent, the tax revenues will really equal what Africa is getting on ODA, sorry, from the external resources. So this is basically, I think we have a last session. I don't want to, probably one thing is really expanding, strengthening the domestic capital market, increase the regional trade and investment, strengthening the regional financing institution. We have our African development. We were talking about the African Development Bank, but there is other sub-regional financing institution. We need also to increase them in the 5 major regions of the continent, and then expanding South-South financing, the BRICS financial institution, and reforming multilateral institutions to support African economies. So basically, thank you for your attention, but basically my main issue is really three main conclusions. First is really the end and the failure of the inherited or the old classical model of financing for development. And this is almost a major consensus around this issue, including within the mainstream economics, the guys who were against or who are supporting and build this model. This is the first issue. Second, we need to renew and to think about a new financing for development, for the development of the continent, and this financing for the development needs to make a major shift from external financing to internal resources and to base our development on internal resources. The last word is about financing. Renewing the financial development model and framework is an important issue, but before that, I think we need to renew and build our new thinking and strategies for African development. I was a bit long. Thank you very much, and sorry for that.